The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
I'm almost willing to bet money that CJ, who is wearing a World Series Toronto Blue Jays hat for those listening on audio, I'm almost willing to bet money he has not taken off that hat since Monday night. Since Game 7 of the ALCS went the Toronto Blue Jays way. For the first time in 32 years, the Toronto Blue Jays will be in the World Series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, and look, we've been fighting our best instincts not to turn this into a full-on Jays podcast the last few days, but I felt the need, I thought, for us to just talk about this. Because that game the other night, Julian, I have to say, I felt like a kid again. Like I truly... I can't explain it. I mean, obviously just an epic game straight up. I think even if you weren't a fan of either the Jays or the Mariners, but you're into baseball, I mean, you could have understand the tension and appreciate everything that was on the line and obviously the George Springer home run, everything that came after. But, you know, for me, I got thinking back, and the Sky Dome opened on June 5th, 1989. So it was a long ass time ago. And I was a pretty excited young Jays fan at that time. And I actually went to my first ever game at that building 5 games into its existence. And the way that came about was my dad needed some new slacks for work. And this is literally, we're talking a pre-Amazon world, my man. If you needed some work clothes, you weren't just, you know, pulling out your smartphone and ordering them and having them delivered within 24 hours. So we were due to drive to a town called Oshawa, which is about half an hour from Coburg. And so I thought that morning, my dad said, "Oh, we're going to the mall, whatever, just doing some errands together." He's like, "Why don't we just keep driving?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Why don't we just keep driving?" And my dad took the money he had for his work pants and took me right into downtown Toronto. We bought scalpers tickets and went to a Jays game, which is a pretty cool memory for me, and literally something all these years later I distinctly remember. I actually looked it up. That day, Jimmy Key took the bump for the Jays against the Detroit Tigers. Junior Felix was leading off. You had Kelly Gruber in the 3 spot, George Bell batting cleanup. Lots of names if you're a Jays fan of a certain vintage you can appreciate. And anyway, just thinking back 36 odd years later, lucky enough to be in the building when they advanced to the World Series. And you know, I think ultimately anyone who probably listens to this podcast loves hockey, maybe loves other sports. It's kind of what it's all about, you know, like, and when you can get to a moment where you can sort of go full circle. And I'll tell you, I'm obviously very excited about this World Series. I don't know how it's going to go. I haven't got a chance to get nervous yet. I'll probably feel that though before it gets going. But on Saturday for Game 2, I'm going to go with my dad to Game 2 of the World Series. So how's that for... you know, how lucky am I? First of all, how lucky are we, him and I? And obviously the people that are fans of this pod know Coburg Papa's out there, but we're going to get to go to a game together after all these years of being Jays fans. Obviously we've been to many games together over the years since that original one in 89. In fact, I went to a couple games at Exhibition Stadium with my dad, including what I believe was the last ever rainout in Blue Jays history, at least obviously in Toronto. We went to a game in May of 89, I think it was, and it was Chef Boyardee bat day, and it rained, and we never got to see the game. Anyway, point is, it's been a long and an amazing life watching sports with my dad, and I think somewhere along the line, even though I became a hockey writer, you know, kind of like some of that spark was planted all those years ago because I just was a kid with huge dreams and loved the big lights. And anyway, it's been a crazy week, obviously reflecting a little bit, and I can't believe the Jays are in the World Series.
I want to ask more Blue Jays questions, but did Coburg Papa eventually get his slacks?
I have no idea. Probably not. I mean, we'd almost need to have him on the pod to tell the story from an adult's point of view, because I was a pretty young kid then. But, you know, I'm pretty sure at that point in time, money was a little tight around my house, and literally the money that was budgeted for him to get those pants went into us going to that Jays game. Because I'm sure relative to the time, you know, the Sky Dome was a huge event when it opened. The team they actually they didn't win the pennant that year, but they got to the LCS in '89. They won the division, the AL East. They were a good team moving into this fancy new park. I can't even imagine what he paid. I remember we sat basically in the CN Tower. We were so high up, but it was awesome. And it was so cool to get to go to that building like that. And especially just in that way, having it sort of be a surprise. So yeah, he probably never got the pants that year, but just made do with whatever he had.
That's such a cool story. I love that story. That's such a cool story. You were in the building for Game 7 of that ALCS. You got to witness one of the biggest sporting moments in Canadian history, one of the biggest sporting moments in Blue Jays history. People are ranking it against the Joe Carter home run. I think it's number 2. I think you would agree with that as well. But people are ranking it with the Jose Bautista bat flip. What was it like watching George Springer hit that go-ahead home run?
It was madness, right? And the game was so tense. Like, I can't remember if I texted this in our group chat, but I definitely sent it to a few friends. Like, playoff baseball in general, but especially getting into a Game 7, it feels like you're slowly drowning as the game's going on. Like, it's hard to find the air you need to breathe because it just feels so tense. And obviously that game, full credit to Kirby, who was pitched for the Mariners. The Jays didn't really string a whole lot together in that game, right? Like, it wasn't a typical game for them where they walked and, had guy after guy just keep moving the chain and put pressure on the other team. It wasn't that kind of night. So it almost required a big moment. And so it just, it was like lightning strike, is what it felt like. And honestly, my feet haven't fully hit the ground since. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. Like, I can't explain how it was crazy. And I think a lot of people in disbelief. Let's face it. I know we make lots of age jokes on this pod, but like, for a lot of people in that building or that are fans of the team now, like, they don't even really remember the World Series years, if they were even alive. And obviously there's a huge Jays fan base of people in their 20s or what have you that literally weren't alive and don't, have much else other than the 2015 and 16 run to hang their hat on. So, I think, yeah, for me, I'd have a hard time arguing for it above the Carter home run, just because if you have a walk-off home run, there's only 2 of them in the history of baseball to win the World Series, and one of them happened in that stadium over that same left field fence. Like, it's hard to argue even any recency bias you have that would be as big as the Carter home run, but I think you can put it above the bat flip just because, it got them to the World Series, and it was the exact hit they needed. It came from a guy who's had so many of those postseason moments in George Springer after he got hit on the knee 2 games before, and the fans cheered in Seattle as he was, leaving the field injured, which obviously, even though Springer hasn't put any words to that, if you've read any of the reporting by Ken Rosenthal or others, it's pretty clear the Blue Jays under the surface were not happy with that response. What a cool time, and how lucky in a weird way for kind of, at times, the Jays have felt like a cursed franchise, or just, a little bit like a team that has a hard time getting it right. Plus they're just in a really tough division where obviously the Yankees and Red Sox have always outspent them usually. The Jays do have a big payroll now. They're not the little team that could by any means, but I'm just saying they're in a division where they're not the biggest fish. And for a long time, even Tampa was just the best run team, even though they didn't spend the money. It's just been a hard division for them to be competitive in, but they still have all those moments, right? Like, to have even the Encarnacion home run in 2016, which is decidedly behind the other 3, the Carter, the Batista, and the Springer. To have even 4 playoff moments that big in that stadium, that's pretty incredible just in itself. And there's something about the bottom of the 7th, I guess. So anyway, I'm sure our hockey fans don't need to hear more baseball. And frankly, the World Series is going to start, and something's going to happen. And hopefully something great happens when Coburg Papa and I are in the building on Saturday night. That makes us want to talk about it for Monday's show. But pretty cool week here. And what a unique time in Canadian sports. Like, you have the Leafs moving multiple games, start times. You have the Raptors moving.
That's where I wanted to go next.
Start times, yes. like that. The Leafs moved a Saturday night game, right? Like, anyone who knows anything about the NHL, especially in Canada, knows the Leafs basically have a standing date, 7 p.m. Eastern, every Saturday of the season. I mean, it's more or less locked in stone. Like it used to piss people off in Vancouver to no end because when the Leafs play a road game against the Canucks, it starts at 4 local to account for the Leafs to have a 7 Eastern. Like that is written in stone. And here they are starting their game at 5 o'clock on Saturday to make room for baseball. I mean, I think it's emblematic of how big this moment is in Canada specifically. But I mean, even a Jays Dodgers World Series, that's 2 major markets, 2 major cities, lots of storylines. Like I bet that series will even draw well in the US, even though you have one Canadian team. I just think it's a compelling matchup. And man, to be in the stadium, dude, it was hugging strangers, all of it. It was crazy. It was like one of those more surreal nights in my life. And the hat I'm wearing right now that you mentioned, I literally, the game ended pretty late for an old guy, but I stood in line for like an hour to get this hat. I didn't get home till like an obscene hour because I had to wait in line for the privilege of buying this hat. Because I was like, I just want to have it sounds weird, like a little memento from it. Like, 10 years from now, this hat will probably frankly be at the back of a closet or something. And I'll see it one day and I'll think of that night. And honestly, I do think it is one of those nights I'll remember forever, just where I was, how I felt, who I was with, just all of it. It was really special.
I know you're thinking of the audience here in terms of the hockey topics we talk, but I think what has been really cool following this run and having you talk about the Jays, it's been really cool having more context about how much this team means to you and hearing you tell stories about you and Coburg Papa going to games and you being at these games during the run and you experiencing that joy and excitement. To me, I think that's just as entertaining, if not more entertaining than anything we could talk about on this podcast. And to your point, this is a story that basically a lot of people in Canada want to talk about. And even if there are some hockey ties, as we mentioned with some of the games from the Leafs being moved, there are actually 3 of them being moved. Like, I'm sorry, but like, this is the biggest thing going on right now. Like, I get it. Like, we could get to the Leafs and their start at some point.
No, it doesn't have to be about the Leafs. I mean, there's lots going on around the whole national. There's lots going on.
And to your point about, people watching this World Series, not only do I think that ratings will still be high for this could be a generational hate watch. We're talking about the Toronto Blue Jays, who, against all odds, not a lot of people thought that they would even make the playoffs. They end up in this situation. And the Los Angeles Dodgers, armed with Shohei Ohtani, they have completely leaned in to being the evil empire and hamming this up to be at a point where, hey, we have an opportunity to, quote unquote, ruin baseball. I think you're going to get not just most of our great nation behind them. You might even get a ton of Americans who do not want to see the Los Angeles Dodgers win again with the payroll that they have and the players that they have. This could be a 20v1, to quote the not to be forgotten beef between Drake and Kendrick, which, by the way, Toronto versus LA, it's Drake versus Kendrick again. I think this could be a generational hate watch for a lot of people when it comes to this series.
Interesting. I mean, I don't have that context. I'll say this. I think the Jays are winning the series. Jays in 7. It was always Jays in 7.
Yeah.
That's my call. I think it'll be closer than a lot of people think, just because, it's easy to overlook the Jays. Man, what even the dedicated listeners of this pod will even know that I was out on the Jays a little bit this season. So,
not a little bit,
a lot. Yeah. Sorry. I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm owning it. What I'm saying is love is complicated, man.
Yes.
And when you love something, it can be all over the place. I'm back in though. I've been back in for a while, to be fair. And I'm still, I don't think it's actually diminished my appreciation or joy for this. Cause I mean, we're talking decades deep now. A little break where we had some time apart doesn't change what we had. If you know what I'm saying.
You got in at the exact right time.
Wow. I mean, whatever. It's not about me in that sense, but
I know at least there's one person in particular who I'm thinking of who reached out to me and like they recognized like, oh man, like CJ getting back on the bandwagons, turn the Jays fortunes around. Could they do this for the Leafs too? You're not a fan, but it's at that point where people are turning that into a running joke.
I guess they're hoping for anything, right? They're hoping Vladdy wearing an Austin Matthews jersey could help, or Austin wearing a Vladdy jersey could help, or Chris Tanev showing up at a Kevin Gausman check. I don't know about. I get the Jays as a fan, but I don't really believe in the demon stuff so much. I think if there's a lesson to be learned from the Blue Jays is that they've really just kind of embraced this moment, right? Like it feels like they are a team that they literally play to the last out. They have immense belief in themselves. They don't get down on themselves when it doesn't immediately go their way. And, I think that they've truly, this is a team that the fans love, right? Like that's something that I'm not saying just the Leafs should want to emulate. I mean, I think ideally every sports team everywhere should want that. But there's like a real reciprocal joy, love thing going on between the fans and the team, which makes it extra special, I think. And success breeds that, like who's kidding who. You can love a team that goes 70 and 90, but it's not quite the same thing as a team that's, pulling out these stunning wins and having these moments that the Jays run has included. But, maybe there's some inspiration in there. I do know that the Leafs are very close. Like there's actually a lot of like legit ties between the two organizations these days. Craig Berube and Brad Treliving have gotten pretty tight with John Schneider and, socially hang about with him a little bit. And obviously the players, you can see kind of the residual stuff there. So that's not a prediction. Look, it's been a tough start here for the Leafs through 7 games of their own season, but there are maybe some lessons in there that could be helpful. I mean, I think that the Leafs have some work to do, but I also do think it is a new era for them, and there's new opportunity if they can figure things out and get back to the playoffs and try this all again.
I invite those who did not listen to our last episode to check that out, because I think our discussion about the Leafs and them seeking an identity, I think was worthwhile to have. I'm not sure how much more we can add to that discussion after the loss against New Jersey, unless there's more context that we need to add. But it just seems and again, I'm covering my own team going through its own weird, inauspicious start. But just from an outside perspective with the Leafs, hearing the fact that they're lacking an identity and even with some of the changes they did in the offseason, to not see that immediate success, it's not quite red flag territory. It's not quite crisis mode. Definitely have questions about Toronto's start and definitely have questions about the fact that not only do they lose to the Devils, but Chris Tanev also gets hurt in that game too.
Sure. I mean, look, to me, they're a team that's still figuring it out. They haven't started any worse, to be fair, than they have in a couple of recent seasons, including last year. But they're 3-3-1 at the time of this recording. I'm not trying to put a positive spin on it, but I think that sometimes context gets lost in a couple bad games, or, you get the situation like Stolarz calling the team out. I think it's easy for people to almost run too far in the other direction. I mean, quite frankly, I have more concerns if we're talking about the Ontario teams about the Senators and the Leafs right now. Just with the start, same caveats apply. There's lots of time to get out of it, but in Ottawa's case, you can't help but feel like some of it is clouded by the fact Brady Tkachuk isn't around, and he's not going to be around in terms of playing anytime soon. They've Linus Ullmark called himself out on like the second day of training camp, and then has not been good since, at least at the level they need him to be. The PK is searching for a lot of answers. Like, I think the Leafs still have fundamental problems. Don't get me wrong, but they're not quite as potentially crippling in my eyes right now as what I'm seeing in Ottawa. But one general comment I'll make about the league is that it feels like urgency arrives really soon in today's day and age. Like there's just multiple teams around the league where I don't want to say panic sets in, but just a lot of alarm bells go off after very few number of games, if those games aren't your favor to start, and both teams in Ontario are dealing with that to some degree. The Leafs have had a pretty favorable home schedule and didn't make good use of it. That's another thing that is worth noting here. But at the same time, I almost want to revisit it with both those teams and probably everybody else, although this doesn't do well because we're doing 2 podcasts a week. Like I want another 3 or 4 weeks before I'm really making declarations in any direction. And so I'm inclined to say with the Leafs team that is incorporating new parts, that I want to see a little bit more before I'm going too nuts. Cause some of the players that they have that aren't performing up to their usual levels yet, like an Austin Matthews, for example, like if you haven't been watching the last 9 years, like it would be pretty foolish to write off Austin Matthews after 6 games, which frankly, and he's also scored in those games. I know some were two into an empty net and one was sort of a tap in overtime from William Nylander, but like, the sky isn't falling, I guess is what I'm getting at. I know fans don't want to hear that probably, but it's the truth. Let's see where we're at in a couple weeks' time.
Very different tune compared to what the temperature might
the
have
LFR?
to be in Ottawa. Yeah, that too. The LFR would make you think that the sky is falling.
That's Steve's job, though, to be fair. And Steve is a
True.
fan, and that comes right from his heart. Like I'm an irrational Jays fan, so I understand. They pulled Trey Savage out of Game 2 of the ALDS. I was in attendance, and I was ready to like storm the field. And they won that game, whatever it ended up, 12-7 or something like that. Point was, like, I thought that was the most egregious decision I'd ever seen in the moment because I wasn't thinking of like big picture. That wasn't my job, but it's a little different when I cover the NHL. And, I think when you're in my shoes or our shoes, I mean, we're both doing the same kind of job in the league. Like you have to react to moments and you have to try to recognize when they're the real big moments and the crucial moments. But you also have to remember, like, Tuesday games in October never define any team's season. Like, without looking it up, can anyone tell me what Florida's record was last year in October? There's no way. They were about 500. I actually don't have the exact numbers, but I know that they were about 500 through October last year. Did it matter in the least when they were marching through the playoffs? No. So,
Nope.
It doesn't mean you ignore warning signs. You don't just slough it all off and say like nothing matters, because that's not true either. You're starting we're all starting to like clock things that are happening. And obviously coaching staff is, and they're working on aspects of the game that aren't clicking. I'm sure in Ottawa, they're spending all kinds of time poring over PK video, looking at systems, looking like, you and I can just look at the stats, or in your case, you're watching the games closely. Don't get me wrong, and saying this is a problem, but they're looking under the hood, and it's their job to fix that. Anyway, all I'm getting at is enjoy these games lightly, but the real fare is still ahead of us.
Panthers were 7-3 by the end of
October. Okay, I guess they must have started 3-3 or something like that, because
they did start 3-2 to start the year, then 3-2-1 because they had their first OT loss was October 17th against the Vancouver Canucks.
There you go. Anyway, I'm just saying they're 3-2-1. The Leafs are 3-3-1. There's other teams anyway. It's kind of academic at this point, depending on what happens next.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about the Sens though is that, I mean, for the Leafs, Austin Matthews is still playing. William Nylander is still there. John Tavares is still there. For the Ottawa Senators, this is all happening amidst their best player, arguably their best player, or at least their most impactful player, being sidelined for up to the next 2 months, it looks like. Like, this is a big test for this group that Tkachuk had said, this is the deepest team he's ever played on. And you look at the depth that's being moved around. They've used all these different first-line combinations. Like, I don't think it's gotten too late yet for this team, but you've said it on the show. We've heard other people say it. I can't help but wonder if the Ottawa Senators want to try this big swing at some point in the season with a trade or some kind of move. Is now the time to do it? Is now the time to look into that? Like, I wonder how pressing that situation will be for the Ottawa Senators, especially now where it seems like nothing's really working.
I'll give you another date, though. July 17th. That was the last trade of any consequence in the league. And I mean consequence, it's not to diminish anyone who's traded since then, but pretty much every trade since then has either been minor league players, salary cap related like moves, like Carey Price's contract being traded to San Jose. The one exception, of course, is the Ottawa, New Jersey deal, McDermott for McEwen. But, in both cases, those are depth forwards that were switching places. It's been hard to make a deal for everybody. And so, especially if you're in a corner, not that Ottawa's in a corner, but they're in a spot, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure the desire is there to take the swing. I don't know what the trade would be at this stage. I mean, Pittsburgh's 5-2. One of the teams that I think will trade some players that make a difference somewhere else, and I still think that'll happen, but it's not happening tomorrow or next week. Anyway, yeah, it's a tough time of year. Like Vegas is off to a great start, right? But they lose Mark Stone, they lose Aiden Hill. Like you're not replacing those guys. Vancouver's down Hedel. They're dealing with their own injuries out there. Like you can't just go pick up what you need. Sometimes you got to grit through it, and we'll see what happens in all these situations.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, the season is not made in its first 7 games of the season. Let's see by game 10. I'm kidding. I'm half kidding a little bit. This episode of The Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by DraftKings. All your favorite NBA players are back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is the place to bet on NBA stars this season. New customers, bet just $5 and get 3 months of NBA League Pass, plus score $300 if your bet wins. Paid in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code SDPN. That's code SDPN. Bet $5 and get 3 months of League Pass. Plus, get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 8887-897777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, pass-through of per-wager tax may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. NBA League Pass auto-renews until canceled. Additional terms at dkng.com/audio. Limited time offer. I'd like to know, there's been some attention around, I'd like to think of 2 particular NHL rookies that have, I think their starts of the season have been pretty good. I'd love to know your impressions on both of them. Matthew Schaefer out in New York just seems like he's picking up points every single night. And Ivan Demidov, who we've talked about on this show, doing his thing for the Montreal Canadiens. Between those two, unless there's another name that you like to mention, which of these rookies have impressed you the most, if you had to pick?
It's no contest for me. It's Schaefer. And that's not throwing any shade in Demidov's direction. I think mostly just because Schaefer was a bit of an unknown how he would react in a couple ways. The guy barely played last year. He was injured. So that was a bit of an unknown. He plays defense, which can be traditionally a harder position to sort of shelter. I mean, there's no sheltering him. He's playing like 23 minutes a night. So there's no sheltering him anyway, the way the Islanders have deployed him. But it can be a spot where a young player gets exposed. And keep in mind, he's an extremely young player. Like he was like a couple days away from being in the 2026 draft class. So, I just think there were way fewer expectations around him externally. I'm not saying he probably had the same high expectations on himself every first round pick feels for himself, but league wide, I don't know that he got the same kind of, attention that a typical first round pick would. And man, he's blown the doors off. He's been friggin' awesome. I've just caught a couple Islanders games live. I mean, he's all over the ice. It's been impressive. I do wonder, will he hit a wall at some point? All those things, just because not only would this be more games than he's ever played, like any player making the jump from junior directly to the NHL, but he didn't play many games last year at all. And so I don't know if is this sustainable, we'll call it, like for this season. But if we're just going off the first few weeks, to me, he's been the best rookie, and he's probably got my attention more because I didn't know what to expect. But he's such a strong skater. I have to say, I'd met him a couple times along the way. A truly, he's 18 going on 30, mature, extremely well grounded, great kid. You can tell, 12 out of 10 in terms of his maturity and just dealing with him a little bit off the ice. But on the ice, he's been a star. And I don't know if that was expected, just again, over his career, I'm sure, right? He got picked number 1 for a reason. The Islanders were thrilled to get him. They see him being a cornerstone of their team for 10, 15 years or more. But you don't always know if you're going to get that out of the gate. And I think he's he's over delivered to this point in time, and you can see it. Like, they didn't intend to use him like this, but it's just like you give him a little more, and he can handle it. And it could still be a long year on Long Island. There's no way around that. They're kind of in a weird spot. They've got a new GM. A weird spot, I just mean sort of caught between, the old era and the new era. They have a few notable players that are on, pending UFAs, guys like Jean-Gabriel Pageau, Anders Lee, some others. They could be a team that, at some point in time is trading players away. Well, we'll have to see how the season plays out. But amid all that, Schaefer's been a home run, whereas Demidov, not to take anything away from him, I think the Canadians are one of the most exciting teams in the league to watch. They're very much like, they're a vibes team to me. Like, I could see them. I can concoct a scenario in my mind that they get on some crazy run as the season goes along, and let's say they add before the deadline and like really like make noise entering the playoffs like that. I could see that, and if that's in their future, I would think Demidov will be a huge part of that, because between Caulfield's probably the main scorer on that team, but he would have to be a big offensive weapon, obviously with Suzuki too. So he's been good, but I think in some ways, probably because there was so much attention paid to him. He did play at the end of last season, a handful of games. Schaefer for me is the most, encouraging rookie through this stretch of season.
Yeah, Schaefer, I think just the skating, the fact that he can defend, he can contribute offensively, like he's shown that he's been able to do it all at 18 years old. And you're right, maybe there could be a rookie wall coming, but like I could totally understand why that impression is there to start off the year. The thing that strikes me,
I was saying, right, Julian, is I'm not giving him my Calder vote or anything. I'm just saying,
fair,
very, very early days, first impressions, I'm giving Schaefer the edge. That's what I was getting at.
Absolutely. What I want to add to my point is the personality to me, and this is, I have not met him personally. I don't know him personally or his family or anything like that. But off of how I've seen him interact with media, I think of how he seems so genuine after being drafted by the Islanders. He comes across as a really likable personality that's worth getting around. We talk about hockey players and how they're very stoic and they don't show too much of themselves, and maybe they're like robots a little bit. Maybe I'm optimistic. I see a little less of that in Matthew Schaefer, and to hear that he comes across as mature and grounded as a fan of the game and as someone who wants to see it marketed more and more personalities shine, I think Matthew Schaefer could easily turn himself into one of those personalities. I think he comes across as a really cool individual. And again, with the knowledge that I don't know him that well, that's a really big star, not just on the ice, but potentially off the ice for the New York Islanders to build around. What a great kid. Huge.
And remember, when they won that number one overall pick, James Hagens, who's a local Long Island kid, ends up being a pretty high draft pick himself, but some are wondering, would the Islanders go with him just because of the local connections? And with respect to Hagens, I think, that wasn't ever really a thing that was going to happen. They would have to be trading for another pick to be drafting him. It's a great story. And honestly, everyone I'm sure that's, familiar with the game knows a bit of Schaefer's story, but his mom died and his billet mom died within 6 months of each other. And it's not just that those events happen in his life, which are obviously tragic. And I can't even imagine going through that at that age, but he's been so eloquent in both working with kids who've lost parents, like being a role model for kids that find themselves in that position, but even just speaking about it a lot, being so, open about wanting to keep his mom's, memory alive by, not wanting to hide from that fact. I just think it's a lot for any young player to just jump in the league is hard, right? Any team, first overall pick or not, it's just hard to play at this level against men, all the things. Just, it's a very public job, right? If you have a bad day at work, everybody notices. And it's one thing to endure that when you're 32 and you're in whatever, you can turn off your phone and, go look at your Lamborghini in the driveway and go like, life's still pretty good. But when you're 18, it's a different thing entirely. So that challenge is hard enough. Plus he's a number one pick. Plus he's been through, a lot of personal trauma. I have immense respect for him as a human, not related at all to the hockey, and the hockey has been an absolute home run in the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Great kid. One thing on Demidov, though, like, the talent he's shown has been absolutely electric. And to see that the Montreal Canadiens are off to the start that they're at, fans have been waiting for a player of Demidov's caliber for decades, going on decades. Like, there's a reason why the hype is there with that organization, with the fan base. And if they find a way to sustain that throughout the regular season, entering the playoffs, you're going to see a lot of clips online. If you're not at the Bell Center already, you're going to see a lot of people going goo goo gaga over the atmosphere at the Bell Center. Like, it's a party. People have been waiting for this team.
If anything, that's what he's contending against. Honestly, I think it's possible just because of how fervent those fans are, which is awesome, and how badly they want him to be that thing. And even that he already is that thing. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, there's gonna be pressure there in that. Like, I don't know how you quantify it. You know, the good news is perhaps for him, you know, I know he speaks English, but like, English is his second language. French, if he has any French, would be his third language. You know, but he might be a little bit immune or removed from some of what's happening outside of kind of the direct team environment. But it's going to be a lot for him to carry, especially as the season goes along. And, you know, people expect big things of the Canadiens, and that can swing in both directions. But I'm with you. I have no doubt that he's going to be a highly impactful NHL player for a long time. But sometimes the question with a young player is, can they do it right now? Right? Like, that's kind of what we're measuring. And so far, so good. But, you know, it's the same way I'm saying we can't overreact to losses on a Tuesday in October. We can't overreact to like great plays either, because as the season goes along, it's going to get tougher and it's going to mean more, and there'll be more defensive attention placed on both of these guys and all the others. You know, you got to prove yourself again and again and again in a league like the NHL, and these guys are still just getting started.
Absolutely. I don't think it's too early to say, if you were to try to project what the race is for the Calder right now. It's very early, and so many other contenders could step in, but Schaefer versus Demidov seems like a pretty good headline to me at the early start of the Calder Trophy race.
I'm not prepared to write that headline yet. I want to give the others a bit of time.
That's fair. And again, like, by next week, it could change. But I think those two, if you were to do a very early poll of all the PHWA writers who get to vote for the Calder Trophy, a lot of ballots would read either Schaefer or Demidov 1-2. I think that's fair to say.
That's fair, for sure.
Okay. So we run through the rookie segment. I'd like to get through a piece you got to work on with Michael Russo and Sean Gentili. The front office rankings. You polled some front office execs throughout the NHL. Very fascinating research done by all three of you. Of course, since this is your show, you get more credit than the others.
Well, I'm not taking more credit. I mean, it's a team effort.
Well, you're just very humble. See, I just set you up to look even better now.
Thanks,
See?
buddy. I mean, that's you're the best host there is. So that makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you. You don't have to. Checks in the mail, CJ. The Florida Panthers, spoiler alert, they're number one on the front office rankings. Your impressions of, the Florida Panthers are defending champions. Of course, they would be number one. But any other takeaways from your experience in talking to other GMs, other executives around the league, and some of the other teams who were mentioned, like the Stars, the Lightning, the Jets, the Golden Knights, the Avs, the Canadiens are there too, the Capitals, the Blues, the Hurricanes, any other team that got a vote as well?
Sure. So here's the exercise for anyone who didn't see the story. We ended up getting 37 executives who responded to the simple question, maybe not simple, but rank the top 5 front offices around the league right now, not including your own. So you weren't allowed to vote for your own team. But other than that, there was no other rules. Obviously you can interpret that question a lot of different ways. But, really what we're trying to get is an industry sentiment of who's doing the best job, from the people on the ground, out in press boxes. I think we got about half the GMs in the league, if not maybe a bit more, responded, but obviously talked to team presidents, assistant GMs. It's a pretty blue panel list. I'll say that. Blue ribbon kind of idea here. What was interesting about the Panthers, not as at their first, I think that probably wouldn't surprise too many people, but they were kind of a begrudging first. Like if you read some of the comments, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I remember one of the comments was something to the effect of like, as much as you hate these guys, you got to kind of respect them. Like, they're doing a great job. That's interesting, right? This is the team, of course, who put in their Stanley Cup rings apologize. No apologies to anyone. Right. So like they're not apologizing for how they do business and, even while getting 25 first place votes and winning pretty decidedly in our poll, there was still some of the quotes that we got back, kind of reflected that people are like writing Florida Panthers down with their first vote, but like through gritted teeth a little bit. And, I think that's interesting. To me, we also did the exercise last year. It was my first year doing it at the Athletic. Some of the rising teams were interesting to me. Like Winnipeg took the biggest jump year over year. And, probably not a surprise, right? They won the President's Trophy. They signed Kyle Connor, got Jonathan Taves. I mean, they've made moves. And if you boil down, I would say the gist of a lot of the responses on them was a lot of like, for that marketplace and some of the, what you might call challenges, not going to be a top free agent destination. They have to be careful how they operate, that they have stayed remarkably competitive despite some of the headwinds that they face. And, I thought that was interesting that that's reflected from their peers. The two other big jump teams, year over year were the Montreal Canadiens and Washington Capitals. Maybe again, not a huge surprise. Both teams made the playoffs last year. If you're looking for common threads, and this can go to Winnipeg too, all those teams have kind of locked up players, right? Like long term, like they've done what I think you might call good business. In the Capitals case, they took some risks on players, or they took some big swings, whether it was Pierre-Luc Dubois, making a trade for someone like Logan Thompson. But a lot of the moves they've made have paid off. The Jacob Chikrin trade, they've extended those players, got them in the fold a long time. Montreal's case, they take the swing on Noah Dobson, obviously getting Lane Hudson signed and some of the other moves they've made. And so anyway, yeah, it's a hard list to maybe sum up, Julian, on a podcast, but I think it's interesting, and I'd encourage you to go give it a read. We're actually releasing tomorrow or Thursday, if you're listening to this pod on Thursday, the full range of comments that we got on every team. So if you really want to nerd out on that, you can see what people think. And some of it's repetitive naturally, but there's some interesting stuff there. And I'll say this, I can't believe how people were pretty engaged on this. I was responsible for getting a lot of the responses. And so obviously I communicated with a lot of different folks around the league in order to get the portion of the responses that I was responsible for. And, a lot of people wanted like to go back and forth a bit or have a phone call or, it wasn't just, there's thought put into this from the people that voted. And I think that's kind of cool. And look, it's an imperfect system. If it was perfect, this is what I would tell you what I would want. I would want every single GM to vote, and I would want one other person from each front office. Like that would be my goal. I would want to get 64 votes, maybe 65 to get a round number. I'll take one person that doesn't work in the league right now, but could be respected, for example. But the truth is, I think we had 27 or 28 teams represented in the responses. We got almost every team. I tried, man. Like some of the teams that I didn't get a response for, trust me, it wasn't because I didn't talk to multiple people with certain teams, but I get it. Look at everyone. It's a voluntary participation, but I think we did a pretty good job anyway of capturing the way people feel about teams. And like, it's not perfect. Some teams fell, like a team like Carolina took a fall. It doesn't, like, there's nothing I can point to that doesn't make sense. Like there's no logical reason for that. It might just be, you only can vote for 5 certain teams. You might get bored of certain teams. You know what I mean? Like Carolina,
yeah.
Like they've been competitive for a long time. They were competitive last year. They got to the Eastern Conference Final. Obviously, they made some intriguing moves in season, intriguing off season moves. They've started like a house on fire to start this season too. Like it's not like the front office is doing a worse job this year than last year, but some of this might be almost get bored of picking the same teams. Like who knows? I don't ask anyone why they voted what they voted, other than the explanations you might see if you read that story. Anyway, long story short, fun exercise. And I think it's going to even get better, because I heard from a few GMs and stuff today once they saw the list out, and they're like, oh, we fell or we rose or whatever. So I think people are reacting more, and I think it's good for the teams too. Like none of this is meant to embarrass anyone. We're only asking for the top 5 front offices. It's not like who's the bottom 5. Like this isn't meant to be, it's actually not meant to be clickbait. It's meant to be, we're really trying to measure, who's doing the best job. And I feel really good about that. This year's list, and I am very optimistic. This could become a thing. We eventually get like 30. There's probably 2 GMs. I'm not going to name them that will never do this poll as long as they're GMs, but I do think there's a day we'll get to like 30 GMs responding anyway.
Ooh, maybe that's an off-air thing. I have a guess.
I wouldn't answer because here's the thing. I'm not looking to shame anyone, embarrass anyone, but there's a couple GMs who sort of always respond with the same thing, and one of them even I went back to. I was like, just so you know, I'm going to keep asking. Like, my goal is to wear you down. So like, it's not personal. I just think some people don't like participating in the anonymous poll stuff. I get it, but again, in this case, this isn't meant to make anyone look bad. Frankly, if you look at the Panthers, they've actually put out a little graphic on their socials saying we were voted number 1. Like that's the flip side, right? Like it is, there's kind of this weird GM of the Year award that gets voted on after the second round of the playoffs, which I find odd, and we don't need to rail against that. This is actually probably a little bit better at recognizing this is truly everyone's peers saying who's doing the best job. And so anyway, of course, a team that won 2 Stanley Cups. I mean, I don't think we don't need to dig into that so much. Dallas, so everyone loves Dallas. I have to say, Dallas has not won a Stanley Cup, obviously, in this generation. 3 straight trips to the conference final, but they won last year's poll. They were second this year, and the Stars, like, people rave about Jim Nill and the staff he's put together there.
Jim Nill will make a trade if he has to make a trade. It's the fact that he's built a perennial Stanley Cup contender, even if they haven't won a cup yet, like he's earned that respect and those GM of the Year awards. It's just Bill Zito's top dog right now. He's the best exec in the NHL right now with the way he's built those teams and how he's not just the fact that he's built those teams, but the fact that he's turned around the perception of an entire organization. Don't you remember those years?
Dude, I remember.
People thought that the Panthers were like, man, they should get moved. Who's going to play in Florida? Who goes to games? There are people who hate the Panthers with a deep-seated passion now. And the biggest reason why is Bill Zito.
And if you go to games, and if you went to games in that era, it's night and day. Like, it's crazy.
Night and day.
Like,
oh my God.
There was a time, I will cop to this, I'm talking 15 years ago maybe now, like I don't mean recent, where I wondered if the Panthers even really had fans, which I realize is unfair. But I just would constantly go down to games there, and there's like 6,000 people in the building, and there's no buzz, and like, it's just like, what is this team like kind of playing in the Everglades? Like, what's going on? Like, they're never competitive, right? They didn't win a playoff series from 96 through to 23, right? Like, with the year they went and lost anyway.
Yep.
They had decades of not winning a playoff series, and they weren't competitive, and old guys went there to retire, essentially get their last contract and ease into retirement. And so, that's obviously been flipped on its head times 10. Now everyone's like, when are they ever going to lose a Stanley Cup, right? Like, it's like they have that whole team locked up for forever.
Well, the damn taxes are ruining everything.
I'm not going down.
Or lack of thereof.
We're not doing that one.
No, we're not doing
that. We will do it at
that's
some point again. I mean,
we will.
That's a trope, and people like it, but we're not doing it tonight.
No, but the whole point is that Bill Zito has done more than just one Stanley Cups. It's the perception that's changed around that organization, and he is the biggest reason why. Like, he deserves all the credit in the world for that. Well,
he traded for Sam Reinhart and Sam Bennett for 1 or for 2 when they didn't have any. Like, they look at the players they've become from what they were before. Mm-hmm. Like, he recognized their talent, got them pretty cheap. If you look at the actual acquisition cost, he found guys like Nico Mikkola and, Gustav Forsling, like when nobody was ever hyping them up. Even getting Seth Jones, which sort of looks obvious, I guess, in reverse, but, that was a home run. Even getting Brad Marchand. He was injured last season, looked like every bit his age at that point. That was the player they identified. I mean, everyone who paid attention understands. I don't have to fill in the blanks what happened next. Like, they are doing an unbelievable job with their pro scouting, I think, in particular. Like, identifying the players that can be additive to the core, getting them when they're undervalued, not giving up a lot. And then they find a way to keep them all. I mean, it's been a masterclass. It doesn't mean it will last forever. Never does, but they got a chance to win 3 straight cups, which it's been a long time since anyone did that.
We didn't even mention the Matthew Tkachuk trade. which was the biggest move at the time when it was done in the middle of the summer, and everyone was wondering why the hell would the President's Trophy winning Panthers trade their top winger and a really good defenseman. Well, not to say why, but a lot of people thought the Panthers lost that trade, that Tkachuk-Huberdeau trade. They are runaway winners now. There's no contest about it. They even got Cole Schwindt back. Don't you remember Cole Schwindt was a prospect in that trade?
I know you do, because you were in Calgary covering that thing from the Flames end of things.
Yeah. He's back with the Florida Panthers. They got him back off waivers. He was placed on waivers by Calgary, goes to Vegas, plays there for a bit, and then Florida got him back. Anyway, I understand Steve Dangle's probably skipped these last 10 minutes because he probably does not want to hear about the Florida Panthers. So we'll move on to Brad Marchand. Speaking of him, he made his return to Boston for the first time since he was traded from the Bruins to the Panthers last season. A very emotional return for him. Literally got emotional on camera when they showed a brilliant video tribute to him on their Jumbotron. I'm sure you saw I know you saw the interview with him and Steve Levy and ESPN where he discussed the trade and discussed whether or not he still had regrets over everything and how it went down. What are some of your other takeaways from that return and Brad Marchand and his that love's still there for Boston? I'm convinced of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, he didn't even hide it, nor should he. I think we have the ability, I would like to think, because I think the best of people, Julian, that we have the ability to understand you can love two things at once. It doesn't mean you wish you were somewhere else. Everything isn't a zero-sum game. Everything isn't, red or blue. There can be a mixture in there, and that's clearly where things lie for Marchand. I actually loved his whole few days there. Going out to dinner with his teammates, paying the bill. He's got Chara and McQuaid and Tuukka Rask and Bergeron at dinner. How open he was with the media, including that answer to Steve Levy, which was great. For anyone who missed it, he said, and I'm boiling down a 3-minute clip to 12 seconds, basically said, I got some regrets about the way I handle myself in negotiations. I got a little emotional at times. I might have done that differently. But that being said, things worked out, and I've got a lifetime of memories by winning that Stanley Cup with my family I never would have had. And I think, again, that's just showed things can be complex. And I love that he broke down the video tribute in the game. He said when he saw his kids on the board, that was the part the part that got him, just, probably reflecting on all their family memories there. So for me, it was one of that game stood out among others, on a full slate in October. Marchand really, what a character. Seriously, he's a big star nowadays. And he has been for a while, but remember, he used to be a big star for the wrong reasons at times and was suspended a lot. And even when he wasn't suspended, he was licking players in playoff series and doing things, kind of known for antics.
Nasty.
For antics. Even years ago, you might forget this, but he got into it with Kyle Bukauskas of all people in a playoff series over a question about a stick. Oh yeah, he got mad.
I forgot about that. Wait a minute.
I'm not trying to raise old demons. I'm just saying he used to find himself kind of the center of attention, not always for things maybe to be proud of. And I think really, he's gotten older. I just applaud his openness, his willingness to discuss things, his what a star turn he's having late in his career. And he's dying. I can tell you, he is absolutely dying to make Team Canada. I have no idea if it's going to happen. He's obviously in the mix. That's not a hot take, but I really believe right up until December 31st, someone like that is going to have to show he's at the level for them to take him, because there will be some concern about his age. They love the guy, the human being. He was, for the Four Nations team, they actually gave him the unofficial award behind the scenes, top PR guy of the team, because he did all the media and soaked up a lot of the interviews and, helped, that's the thing. He helped take some of the burden off his teammates because he was willing to do everything, which matters. But obviously what matters too is what you can do on the ice. And his playoffs went a long way to getting him there, but he's got to keep motoring here in the regular season. But pretty cool return to Boston. I think he'll be happy to have that behind him. I'm sure the team will. The Bruins they're on to new things here. After I picked them to finish last and they got off to a really good start, and now they've lost, I think, 5 in a row. So Could be a long season in Boston, but that was a pretty memorable night at TD Garden.
Yes, absolutely. Just some other quick hits before we get to stick taps. Mark Stone out week to week with a wrist injury. Here come the groans from everyone. Once again, another week-to-week injury, long-term injury with Mark Stone and the Vegas Golden Knights. What's next for them? What do you think of how they've started their year and this injury setback?
Well, they got points in their first 7 games. So I think they're 5-0-2. It's pretty good. Maybe the bigger injury could be Aiden Hill because, the Golden Knights went and signed a pretty notable right winger this year. So in terms of like soaking up some of Mark Stone's usage and minutes and things like.
Why are we treating Mitch Marner like the boogeyman?
No, I know, but I'm just saying that.
I love how.
But having Mitch Marner also on the team, I think you're better equipped to replace some of the things. Not that they're the same guy, but Marner's an all situations player. I think it's easier to get by his time off, and it's going to be some time for Stone. But Aiden Hill, it's Akira Schmid, and they called up a goaltender, Carl Lindbaum, from their AHL team, a young goalie, a promising goalie, but who knows how ready he is to, get in there. So this is a time where we talked about earlier, the Golden Knights have to push through this, and I don't think there's no trade that solves these problems. I think they're a deep enough team, they're experienced enough team to push on, but they might be in for some tougher sledding here than what they've faced so far in the year by losing one of their most impactful forwards. I mean, if you look at the scoring race, Eichel and Stone were both right up at the top in the last few days. I know it's early, but still, they've had a great start to the season. Aiden Hill's obviously their number one. They did sign Carter Hart, but he can't play an NHL game for still 6 weeks or so. So,
right.
They don't have. They're going to have to kind of push through with not being at full strength, but they're a deep team, and I think they'll be okay long term. What might be more interesting, and we'll just have to see how it unfolds, is what does it mean for Hill specifically, probably, but also Stone in terms of Team Canada? How long is their layoff? How do they play when they get back? Does that impact the decision making that Team Canada is going to have? Because both remember the Four Nations team and obviously are right in the mix for the Olympic squad.
One last thing, any takeaways from the NHL canceling the media day? Some people called it an Olympic send-off that was supposed to be at the UBS Arena in Long Island in February ahead of the Olympics. Looks like they'll get the actual All-Star game for real the year after. Thoughts on that? I thought that Olympic send-off idea, maybe not a big draw, but you tell me.
Do you want to know what I really think?
Of course.
They saved themselves from a mistake.
Okay.
They saved themselves from doing something everyone would have been like, why did you do that? And look, I think it was partly in duty, right? They'd promised the Islanders and UBS Arena an event in February 2026. It was back in 2024. They awarded the All-Star weekend to that team. Then the Four Nations happened, and everyone's like, holy shit, we can't go back to an All-Star game, which I think was the right response, quite honestly. If you look at the NBA, they're changing the format of their game, and not David Stern, help me out. The commissioner, Adam Silver, pardon me, Freudian slip, is out there talking about how like the Four Nations that the NHL held has forced them to change All-Star weekend. So, credit to the NHL. They recognize they can't just roll out another All-Star weekend. They were having everyone fly out of the New York area to Milan that's going to the Olympics. So I think it was always going to be a half measure. I don't think it would have satisfied anything. I think it would have opened them up to criticism and head scratching and everything. Do you know what? They saved everyone a headache here. They've saved the players whose focus now is just, leaving their teams, getting to the Olympics, being ready to compete for their countries. I'll applaud them because sanity prevails, and I think it's the right decision.
Yeah, you got that right for sure. I don't even really need to add too much to that. I think you have it right with that. Sanity prevails. And with that, let's get to our stick taps. Do you have a stick tap? I think I have a pretty good idea as to who might get it, but I would love to know your answer.
I contemplated giving it to the Jays front office because feel like I owe them some flowers after where I've stood. But
you contemplated that, bro?
I at least thought about it. Instead, I'll just go with the easy answer and say George Springer. Thank you, George. We're a hockey podcast, believe it or not, even if you heard tonight's episode. But, you fought through in a way that we were used to seeing players fight through injury and Stanley Cup playoffs, have those moments. It was almost his Bobby Bond moment. Scored a goal on a broken ankle for the Maple Leafs many, many years ago and won the Stanley Cup. George Springer obviously not at 100% after taking that pitch right off the kneecap. It sounds like he's dealing with other injuries as well. Not a young man, but he's fighting through for his team, and he gave the Jays and frankly a whole bunch of us in this country and around the world, a memory that'll last a lifetime. So good on you for fighting through it. I hope he's healthy enough to get through at least 4 to 7 more games, but it's going to be 7, Julian, because it was always Jays in 7.
I like that. Echoing, just playing off of that, I'll give my stick tap to Vladdy Guerrero Jr., who, he walked in with the Austin Matthews jersey. He found a way to play through. I don't really believe in that demon curse stuff either. Who cares? But him being ALCS MVP, really cool to see. As someone who's not a Jays fan, I'm rooting for Vladdy. I don't hate the Dodgers. I know people hate them. I have a little.
I don't hate the Dodgers either. It's funny that you mentioned that during the episode. I was like, I've missed that. I'm serious. I didn't realize people hated them.
Oh yeah. People hate the LA Dodgers, and even Dave Roberts, the manager. I got to find the exact.
I can't keep up anymore. Who hates what?
But Dave Roberts, legit, I was asked a question about going to the World Series, and he says he hopes that he hopes this team essentially ruins baseball. Wow. Essentially, they're all in on the fact that they are the big bad bullies of the league, and they could essentially, quote unquote, again, ruin baseball if they go out and they win again. They have some of the best players in the world, including the best player in the world in Shohei. A lot of people are saying that they could win this in a sweep. I don't believe that either. I think the Jays have what it takes to make this a very competitive series. I don't think this is going to be as an open and shut case. Anyway, all that to say, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., watching him perform during this postseason run has been so awesome to watch. I've really enjoyed it. I was a big fan of his dad growing up as a Montreal Expos fan, and to know that Vladdy wants to win that ring and give it to his dad, I want to see that happen. I know there are Expos fans who probably feel a little bit split about watching the Toronto Blue Jays go to the World Series. I don't think that's everybody. I think there are fans now who
that shouldn't be everyone. Jays fans never hated Expos fans. That wasn't really a rivalry. 2 different leagues.
Right, but if you look through the history of the Expos and contraction and stuff, the Jays did vote. The Jays did not support them behind the scenes.
You know what? I got to watch this documentary, by the way, the Who Killed the Expos. I haven't seen it, and I actually don't know the story, so I'm excited to watch that. Maybe on a flight to LA at some point, I'll watch that.
On a flight to LA? Maybe. Is there a reason why you'd be going on a flight to LA, sir?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, all right. Anyway, I'll stop my long-winded spiel. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. gets a stick tap. Get your questions in for Ask CJ. We'll get to that at the start of next week's show, whether through Discord, whether through X, whether through Blue Sky, whether through Carrier Pigeon, whether through Message in a Bottle. If you happen to be on this secret-ass flight that CJ's going on, please send him a message. We'll take as many questions as we can. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, and enjoy the rest of the week and the World Series. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.